Hello everybody and welcome back to Army Painting Series 19. This is the Sisters of Battle series, and episode 2, as always, means a color test figure. Speaking of colors, we're calling a change here. The medium that we're going to do the rest of the unit in, well, we're going to do the oils, and there's several reasons for this. I think one of the big reasons is that I've been asked many times about the fluorescent oils, because we've seen the fluorescent acrylics a bunch of times. We even saw it on the base painting. And also people haven't had a chance to see the object source lighting in oils. Now, I did this one test here on a Twitch session a little bit ago just to see what would happen. And I was actually really pleased with the results on this. And I thought, since we've got, well, several of this, not all of them have the flaming bases there, but enough of them, I think, to make this interesting. Plus, with all the freehand that we've got to do, and that freehand was done wet into wet, actually. And you can see there's some gold on here, non-metallic metals. Look, there's even green marble on this. So I thought this was a good test case, and we could maybe, instead of waiting for yet another series, I thought, let's just get right in here. Now, there's probably going to even be some more colors thrown out here, but let's do a quick little review here. We've got some cadmiums here. Now, this is cadmium yellow pale, cadmium yellow deep. I do want to make a little important caveat right here, is that these are your hues, and there's a difference with these. This is another reason why I want to get into this. So your cadmium pale hue, that is not, and I'm going to show you, this is actual cadmium right here. And cadmium is a heavy metal, and there is cadmium in this. There is not cadmium in this. They find some other substance, chemical, whatever it is, to get that sort of intense. It's not going to be as intense as this. It's also not as heavy as this. My goodness. So here's a container of this that I made. It weighs a ton because literally there's heavy metals in here. So I think we'll just not use the cadmium scarlet just yet. We've got some other really interesting cobalt and cadmiums and that sort of stuff to use next time around. Again, it's cadmium green. This is not an actual cadmium green. So just remember that. This is more of the hue here. This is another one that comes in that 10 color starter set. Now, then here we've got our brown matter. This is another one that I've really enjoyed. This one, this is indigo. This is a new color. This is not one of the, shall we say, less expensive colors. This is the real deal here. The intensity of this. And I'm thinking actually this maybe mix with some of our cadmium yellows to make our greens. We also do have a phthalo green, however. So another very intense dark green, but it's going to be super transparent. This is another one. All of these colors, the idea is you're going to learn some stuff about the difference between one oil paint to the next. We've also got some Payne's gray, some olive green. You're going to see a lot of this, and especially those initial layers. And then, among other things, we've got our fluorescent orange that comes from Marion Street here. And they do have a series of the fluorescents. Now, these are around 15 bucks. Now, it is a big container. It's 55 mil. That is not super expensive, believe it or not. That indigo color in a smaller tube cost more than this did, probably by $4 or $5. So, and that cadmium probably cost $6 or $7 more at 18 mil less than this. So it sounds expensive, but it's really not. And this does seem, of all of the fluorescents, this seems to be the most genuine and effective. Because let's compare. Let's compare this here. See how it kind of bounces the camera the same way. So that, to me, that speaks to its effectiveness as a fluorescent paint. Now, again, there might be other stuff we're going to throw in here. We got your standard yellow ochre, and this is my Terra Rosa that I love so much. Some of these are for armor, some of them are for hair and the skin. So we're going to try and match this as best as we can. This was it was a figure that I did to see, okay, what works with these new sisters versus the old ones that I did. So what we'll do is take this one here, and the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to throw those pre-glazes into here, and then we'll stick around here, because if I've got this on the base, it's going to be a bit of a mess there. Again, the original plan was to do acrylics. We have shifted it to oils, and I really want to see what's going to happen here. I think this could be very interesting for you guys to see. So what we're going to do is we're going to put that paint out on the palette, which is even more simple than, say, the wet palette. It's the same parchment paper. However, this piece of cardboard, I mean, you can see this, yeah, Amazon box. I just blue tack it here, and then now we've got ourselves a nice slightly absorbent surface, and you'll see what I mean once we get into our figure, and we're going to do that next. We'll start out with that usual pre-glaze. Haven't really come up with an official term for it yet, but we'll just call it a pre-glaze, and that is going to mean take in this is our high quality thinner, again from Speedball, and it is high quality. It's not the cheap nasty stuff. So Payne's Gray here, what is this? What's in this bottle here? And I will link the episodes where we take these together, and this is how I made all of my, for lack of a better term, my own oil brushers. We mix these two together, not necessarily in equal parts. Some colors take more, some take less, some take a lot more of this, and some in the case of Terra Rosa, took very little of this. And that's just what's gonna, every time you see this, that is what is in this little container right here. Now you're gonna hear that sound. That is just pieces of sprue, these metal sprues, because they don't stain, they don't rust, they don't any of that kind of stuff. It's ideal for leaving in here. Again, that is, now this is your more high level Payne's Gray right here, but there is the student grade. You can get that if you want. We also have our sponges. We've got some sponges even that are cut up like so. Palette over here. So you're looking at your titanium white, cadmium yellow. That's cadmium yellow pale, cadmium yellow deep. There's your yellow ochre. There's your fluorescent, Terra Rosa, Payne's Gray, olive green, raw umber. That's your permanent green light. That is, oh, there's your, yep, that's this one right here, your permanent green light. That's your cadmium green over there. We don't actually have the phthalo green out here yet. That is our indigo, and that is our brown matter over there. So, like I said, a couple colors might wind up out on the palette as it is. Now, let's gather up our sister of battle here, and we're going to just hang on to, I think, this part over here. I think that's the best way about it. Now, as always, we're going to start with one of our number 8 rounds here, and you can see this one has seen many rounds of action. Look at that. That's not exactly what you call pristine, which makes it ideal for this task. I'll take some of this. We'll put this out here. Take a little bit of our Payne's Gray. Maybe a little touch of that green. Some of our indigo. Look at how dark and rich that is. We'll take a little bit of our olive green, and the idea is we will change this color every so often here. Now, it's important to, with the oils, to start with something like this, because, well, you'll see how it semi-enhances the the Badger Steiner Res Primer. It does that, but it's really more about giving it a little hint of its own shading. Here, I'm going to take some of that brown. There is no base coats with the oils. For those of you not familiar with the oils, well, now you're going to be familiar with that. And it is, we'll put this over the entire figure. We will change as we go around the figure. So here we get more of the brown. It's just important to have some paint on here, and it'll be evident once we get to the more regular phase of the painting. It is something that I have learned, especially in recent tutorials using the oils, to go more minimalist on the actual amount of oil paint. And by minimal, I mean just practically looking like a dry brush. You will see that all play out, but it is amazing at just the how much less paint I'm putting on these things. And we're not just getting faster, drier times, we are getting less shininess, all kinds of positive results from that. So let's grab one of our sponges here. And I'll show you one of the other ones that has been primed. Again, just Badger Steiner Res. You could have just primed this all one color. Don't be beholden to the zenithal. Don't be a slave to the zenithal. It's really not that key or important, especially when you can do something like this. It's almost like you're doing your own custom zenithal here. We're not trying to remove all of that pre-glaze. We're taking away some of it in certain areas here. And that is that. Now let's compare this to this. See how it's already getting a little suggestion of some color to it, not just whether it's lighter or darker, whatever. Little suggestion of color there. Now what I will do is I'm just going to have to stop here because this has to be glued in place before I can continue. I had thought about painting it on a dowel rod, but I think you need the impact of seeing her foot by the glowy stuff right there. So what we'll do is we're going to glue around there. We're going to get the glue a chance to dry, and then we're going to pop right back in with some of our initial layers of paint, and we're going to do that next. It's time to start applying some paint here, and it's also time to establish a little bit of a glow on this. Now, make sure that I've got this palette about as centered as I can, and this is one of the more, I want to say, recent discoveries here. And this just has to do with, and you're going to see this a lot. You're going to see me grinding paint into this brush, minimal amounts of paint on the figure. Less paint here is better. Now we're going to start out here. Grab some of our fluorescent, but it does need a little bit of help. So that's where the cadmium yellows come in. It's just, how can I say this? Just like the acrylic version of the fluorescence, it's really, really, really thin, and it needs just that opacity boost. And look at this. This is going to be, see how little paint there is on this brush? And you can see how this is almost, it looks dry by comparison. So let's start out here. This is exactly what we did on our storm cast. You have to remember that while it looks dry, it's not dry. It may look that way, but it is most definitely not dry, because look at, see how we're picking up all that pre-wash here? But again, it's a minimal paint application. We're just trying to figure out, okay, what's going to catch some of that glow, what's not. Nice thing about the oils is if you just don't like it whatsoever, you basically take one of your makeup sponges and you wipe it all away. The other reason I did that storm cast is because in many ways, a lot of the armor shapes are, you have to admit, they're pretty similar, if not shockingly similar. Now I might even bring in, well, that's what I think we'll have the brown matter for that. But look at very quickly, it happens just as quickly as it might, say, with your acrylic fluorescent. Is it really that different? It kind of is in that we're trying to apply less and less paint here. With the acrylics, you just tend to pile things on. And this, I've talked to people about this when they start using the oils. So this is, now remember, when you guys ask questions, you always, folks will say, well, is it okay if I ask questions? And I say, yeah, it's good if you do, because it helps. Because then I can sort of just think about not just answers to you, but then maybe even augment the lessons just a bit, because your questions then say, okay, what is it that what's the problem that most people run into? And that's that's when I was definitely able to figure out the problem a lot of folks were running into was just way too much paint. Because yeah, I wasn't putting much paint on there myself, and sometimes it was still taking a while to dry. Then you get other folks that are putting a ton more paint on there, and boy, is it taking a long time to dry. And this approach will probably be different even from the Splintered Fang. And yes, we're gonna finish that series. Just it's well, this entire year is just, there's always going to be some weird things coming my way that are completely unexpected, and that just we will try to complete that series as soon as we can. I try to just keep all the different plates in the air, spinning around as much as I can. So that's a real quick establishment here of just some rudimentary glow. Now the gold here, you can see, well, lots of our greens in there, some of our purple. Speaking of greens, let's do this here. So we've got some of our, that is some of our cadmium, or no, that's our permanent green light. We're going to mix that with a little bit of our indigo here. As always, look at this. This is one of the biggest differences. And I know I've done this a little bit before, but this has become much more, see again, I'll even take away a little bit more. I'll even take, because remember we have that pre-glaze that's on here, which means we've got a fair amount of paint already on this thing. Now, I'm not going to do much down here because we have some freehand that's going to go there. So essentially, in many ways, what we're doing here is we're just reactivating some of the pre-wash that's already there. Again, minimal amount of paint. So we always talk thick over thin, right? That's the big thing about oils. It's always thick over thin, vice versa. And it's mostly focused on, well, thinner means more of the thinner in the mix. The kind of the discovery that I've made is that if you do, there's a wet thinner and a dry thinner. And I know that sounds a little weird, but that has been a significant difference that I've noticed when I actually consciously just have less paint on the brush, even though it's not necessarily more of a thinned down watery version. It's amazing. Now we also have to think about reflected light in terms of, say, our robes and everything else. That's going to happen. Now we are going to take, speaking of reflected light, one way to make sure some of the green gets reflected in there is to not wash out the brush. And we're going to start to just very gently go into some of our areas that have gold here. So kind of by default, we're already starting to get some green into our golds. That is the advantage of the oils. Something it's much harder to achieve by far with the acrylics. Now we will also, another way to keep your brush from getting just too wet, and that by wet I mean too wet with the thinner, we're just going to use it. Look at all the paint that came out of that brush. As minimal as I tried to be with the paint, look at how much was still on that brush. It's important to just wipe away the brush. You can see we've got plenty of examples here of where we were wiping away that paint. Now we're just going to take more of that's our yellow ochre. I am going to start to throw a little bit of my cadmium yellow in there. There is no base coat with the oils. Essentially what you kind of do is you put paint on there and you mix it around, as opposed to, well, okay, there's this layer, then there's going to be a progressively lighter layer, followed by a progressively lighter layer. The oils, that is not how that's going to work. That's not how that's going to work. There may be times where all you'd see me do is just like plop some color in an area, and then just grab another brush that has no paint on it whatsoever and just start to blend. So you can see, by comparison to our object source lighting, these areas of gold tend to look a little bit more greenish, a little less of the orange. We'll certainly incorporate some of that, but I want to make sure that the green is passed on into the armor. Now here we're taking a little bit of our Terra Rosa, a little bit of our brown matter now. All of a sudden, quickie little difference here. We've got just the earliest hints of something that is leather. We got a grenade over there. We got purity seals here. I'm just going to hit him with this dark color for right now. Then Terra Rosa and some of the brown matter again for the hair. Going minimal here. Look at how we just take very little paint, and look at how that covers. That covers pretty well for not much paint on the brush. And you can see it really doesn't do much on my hand, because it is interacting with that little bit of a pre-glaze. And as always, Badger Steiner Res, you could have just primed the whole thing. This here, the light flesh. There's also the sand color, which I think is called neutral. I'm thinking that's what it's called. I will try to sneak a little bit of my regular gold color in there now. A little bit of our raw umber, just hinting at some of the parts of the gloves here. Maybe even a touch of shading on the hair, and then we're going to go in here. We're going to just establish some darker tones. This is what I mean. There's no, per se, base coats. We also want to have some of those horizon lines like what we see here on her backpack. Nothing precise yet, nothing written in stone. I will take a touch of that Terra Rosa. We are going to put the tiniest amount of our titanium white into this. And the only skin tone that's anywhere along here is just on the face. I will bring that over here and some of our rock pieces. Not quite sure what that is supposed to be. Nah, I'm just tempted to actually pull out a little bit of, say, cerulean blue, but just look at and there's just the junk that's on my brush, and yet the indigo blue strong enough to make a big influence on this color here. I already start to think about a touch of blending in some places. But what happens to folks with the oils is they start blending, they get really excited naturally, because they probably haven't been able to enjoy blending like that. And man, there is something about, you just keep cranking more and more paint down there, right? And you've got way too much on there, and it takes days to dry. Should not take days to dry. I've got my drying time in some cases down to just several hours. By several hours, I mean, 4, 5, 6. Now, the Miyamo oil brushes kind of don't count because I believe they have a substance in there that makes them dry faster. I'm pretty committed now that I've used them for a while and I'm a little more experienced with those and have my own oils to compare those two. I am very much convinced that there's just something in there that makes those dry faster. I thought it was maybe just the thinner that was doing that, but there's clearly a little more to it than that. Now I do need some slight touches of my gold in here. Now this is that cadmium, a little bit of our yellow ochre. I think I'm gonna have to throw some red out here. I realize purity seals, that sort of thing. Now, while we have our yellow, while we've got that, get some cadmium yellow light. We'll mix that with our fluorescent here. Really trying to get excess paint off of that brush. It's important. And if I see that it doesn't necessarily want to stay there, that means a couple of things. I need to give that a few more minutes. This is why the oils are ideal for army painting and less so for one single figure. But we can manage this. We'll do our one single figure here, our color test figure. We can certainly go lighter than this, but we won't push that too quickly. Remember, this is another thing where we can just place a color and then move it around. That's another way of avoiding the removal of some of the paint. The unwanted removal, I guess, is maybe where we'll go with that. I'm thinking potentially even under here. Yeah, touch of that. Now, while we have this going, we're going to do a little bit of a glazing type of scenario here. And yes, wet glaze. That is actually going to be a wet glaze. We will take some of our indigo here. We'll mix it into, it's a bit of our pre-glaze there. And this is your panel line wash. We just touch the brush to this. Just touching that brush there. But you can see, even as wet as that oil is, because we have a nice gentle touch on this. See, it doesn't just mix with it. Look at that. Already, we established that very quickly. Now, on the other side of this, let's do it. Look at how it follows the, you can see the capillary action of the oils right there just on my hand. See how we just touch it here? We're not actually painting with it. We're just touching that. Very quickly establish some shape in our bolter here. Well, I guess we'll do some kind of diode thing too. That's a typical thing I like to do on the ends of our bolters there. We need some darks in this area now. I'm thinking that might actually be a leather case right there. So I think we'll go back in with some of our browns. Okay, where is my, speaking of that, we've got there a little bit of brown madder alizarin. We're going to mix that, well, brown madder, sorry, that's a watercolor, the brown madder alizarin. And it's been a long time since I used it with watercolors, but it just seems to be on the brain right now. Once again, we're just touching that there. See it, a nice little capillary action glaze that we get. It follows those lines. I will say this, you need the more detailed the figure, the better this is going to work. If you got a figure that's a little sketchy on details or whatever, it might prove to be more difficult. That is why I always say to kind of pick your battles with the oils. You choose a figure that's going to give you, especially early on in the process, pick a figure that's probably going to give you the best likelihood of success. And yet all of this, it's clearly wet. The stuff's only been there. Stuff's only been on her just a few minutes. Again, sorry about the voice. I think there's getting to be some molds or something in the house because of so hot and the house being closed and no kind of real air circulation going on. So I apologize for that. As we get some of our darks in here, all of a sudden we didn't have to apply a severe amount of lights. Here, look at this. We're going to take the indigo, we mix it with that brown matter. Let's just get some dark here into the underside of this shoulder pad. Same on the other one. Again, the indigo, just a little hint of that brown matter. It gets it off of the dark blue. Perhaps even another little glazy type thing here. Let's glaze some of the brown matter into this. We even have our little sponges here. We could go back in there and see, we took a little bit away. It's all good. It's all good. Back to this darker, almost bluish glaze. Now, I used to use the Payne's Gray all the time, but then I really started to enjoy the indigo. Is just such a powerful, influential color. We'll just darken that down. Now let's find ourselves some more dark areas here on our armor. Perhaps even a little bit of a glaze. We got this, it's almost like a greenish color now. That's going to go in here, just to form a bit of a shadow area for our object source lighting. We'll do the same here. Again, we put a little bit there, and then we move it around. So what happens? All right. What we'll have to do is we will have to complete our greens here, and I'm thinking actually, yeah, that permanent green might just do the trick for our lighter green. So let's throw a little touch of that in there now. Now remember those Dick Blick brushes, those sables? This is a 0. I kind of forgot I had this one. But the nice thing is I can kind of abuse it the way I do the number 8 round craft brushes. Yeah, we got a bunch of paint out of that. And it makes the robe painting experience a touch easier, I think. Yeah, look at this. It just kind of blends itself. I could just be placing some color and pushing this around with another blending brush, but because we are at such an early stage here, we're still really playing off of that initial glaze that we did. So already starting to feel that Kelly green color. I think that's the other thing that can be tougher for people first starting with the oils, because you don't just, there's no triads for the oils. It doesn't work that way. In no way, shape, or form does it work that way. It's very, very different. It's going to be hard to really see the full advantage of the oils here. And just this one figure, When we get to the rest of the unit, though, that will, hopefully that really shows the whole reason why oils are a big advantage. And well, they're an advantage in a lot of ways, but especially an advantage when you're doing the unit stuff. And now if I do feel like this is not catching enough, I can thin it down. There's several different approaches that I can use. I'm going to ever so slightly get a little bit of that cadmium green pale into this. But not too much. You can see it wants to, look at it, it wants to pick up the other colors that are there. So that means just a couple of more shots of this, and it's already time anyway to move on along to our next segment. We will head on over now. We'll do some things on the face. We're going to start to pick out some lighter tones here in our golds, in the hair, some other places here. Just get a couple of shots of green here. And there we have it. Okay. They're actually going to put a little bit of our magenta out there too, I believe, for stuff like the face and the hair. So we'll do that next. So in many ways, the focus has been on darker colors up to now. Let's see what we can find in the way of lighter tones. And we've got a significant way we can go. Now we are going to take some of our titanium white. We're going to take a touch of our indigo here. Make ourselves a couple of blues. And this is some lighter blues. We could use some cerulean too. Now this is also a bit on the thicker side. If it doesn't stick, then we know we have to go the other way. But as you can see, that sticks quite nicely. Why? Because the paint that was already there was indeed thinner. Even you can see we're trying to get rid of as much of the paint as we can. I know I keep emphasizing that over and over again, but it is a very important thing. It's really important. You can see we're also not getting all the way to any kind of a white or anything like that. It's lighter, yeah, but definitely not anything resembling white. And we're going to get ourselves a little bit of a lighter tone down there. Now, let's see what happens. So this is more of our titanium white here, but now this time we're actually going to take some of our, that's just that liquid thinner that you saw. And we're going to give ourselves a couple of lights along here. It's for me, it's as much of a roadmap as anything else. You can't get much lighter than this highlight-wise. And oh, that's her glove there. Okay, so duly noted. That's a glove. We'll go back and we'll do some more stuff on this later, but for now, this is what's going to happen. We're going to take some of that same white over here. We're going to take some of our cadmium yellow pale now. And again, I can stick this on my finger here because it is not actual cadmium yellow. If it was the real McCoy, I'm going to be less inclined to do what you just saw me do there. Now remember, just like our color test figure, you can see all those striations and such. Well, just because this is oil doesn't mean we're not going to do the same thing here too. Some of those very same principles will apply. You can see a very minimalist approach to our brush strokes. Now we're changing up our color a bit here. This is the yellow ochre now mixed with some of our white. It kind of gives it a warmer look. Because we're looking to get some reflected light. You can see right there on her, I think that is your greaves right there, the armor on the lower portion of the legs. And remember, we always have our some kind of a blending brush nearby, and so we have those brush strokes there. Well, all of a sudden the brush strokes are gone. Over here, maybe we don't want a hard edge just there. Look at that. Hard edge is dissipated. It happens pretty darn quick. It's the amazing thing about the oil. I know I say it over and over again, but they're so flexible in what they can do. See, nice. Look at that. That's wet oil over wet. Yep, that is definitely wet oil over wet, and it can most certainly be done. I'm going to go back up to this. Now this is much more of a kind of like a lemon yellow color almost, which actually, believe it or not, that is an oil color. Not quite. I don't think there's no watercolor equivalent to that. I'm just gonna throw that little guess out there. It's been a while since I used watercolors, but I'm pretty sure you don't have that's a bit more of an opaque sort of a deal right there. And we are going to find ourselves some. Now this is where we're thinning it down. So we take just ever so slight amount of our thinner here, and I mean a tiny bit. Too much of that, it's just going to be running all over the place. You don't want that. We're just going to find where can some of these lights be. We also have to go back in with some darks. We got to go in with something that's a little bit more orange in some places here. We'll obviously have to do the hair. I think maybe, depending on timer, the focus is going to be on the armor especially. We've got these lines right here. We'll just get some lighter color on those. And I'm going to go a little bit thinner because I think that's going to most definitely do the trick there. But I can only get a few brush strokes out of that. I have to go back here. I have to get some fresh paint. I can't just keep taking the same brush and hitting the same area over and over again and expect I don't want to say a clean result, but an untainted result, I guess. I have to start thinking about some reflected light down here. Now let's change things up a bit here. We've got some of it's a little bit of that Terra Rosa in there. See how it takes it off the green, starts to give it that hint of orange, but not necessarily the kind of fluorescent orange. Start to think about some of the other surfaces here. Now I do like the idea of, this is something that tends to be kind of fun, is you take the white, you take that brown matter, you get some interesting, that kind of reddish brown that you get, but has a little grayishness to it. Also very, I think it's handy, especially for items like this. As always, less paint is more. More paint is less. That's a Book of Wobble thing right there. I could swear I've done that at some point, but I guess maybe I never did turn that into a Book of Wapple thing. But that needs to happen. Now we also have this little doodad over here. Another highly technical paint term as we take some of our, that's just raw umber there, so it really does turn this into a grayish brown. And remember, we also have this little line of some freehandy goodness there. So we're going to get in a little bit of our yellow ochre, and we're just going to let some of that pre-glaze just mix. That's all mixing there. You can put freehand over wet oils. It can work. It's about timing. If I had tried to do that, say in that initial early segment, it would have for the most part just bounced right off of here or slid right off or taken the other layers underneath it off as well. Now we're starting to get in some of our, that's a little bit of our cadmium yellow deep, so that's going to have more of an orange look to it all by itself. And we don't want that just on there. We're going to throw some of that too on the armor here in some areas. But thinking about this green, where's that going to reflect? It has to reflect on this armor somewhere. There's some of that cadmium yellow. And now, of course, if this was a genuine cadmium yellow here, I do think the intensity factor would be raised significantly. But it could, and again, it just depends on how things are where you live too. There could be some restrictions that way, but for me, I was handling oil since I was 11, and if I could somehow survive to this day and age as an 11-year-old surviving using oils for the kind of unsupervised in some ways when you think about it, we're just getting some of our reddish color into the hair, kind of an orangey red. I think you can manage it too without too much harm to yourself. If you are, I try to emphasize this too. You can give a mouse a ton of anything and kill the mouse. That's just how it is. How much oil paint do you think you're going? You're not like a studio artist who's piling up paint on a 6 foot tall canvas and just swimming in oil paint. You're not doing that. We're using the tiniest, most minimal of amounts of oils on this. So I think you'll be all right. I'm just going to throw that out there as we take a little bit more of our thinner there. And again, sensitivity issues wise, I almost had to stop doing oil painting class because the horrible, cheap, nasty thinners that people were using were just driving me nuts. I mean, I could not bear to be in the class, which was very disappointing because I loved oil painting. So I don't want it to be thought of that I have no sympathy for people that have sensitivities to things, because I was. Actually, my solution was, when I was painting oils just outside of the academy, was to just use the palette knife and a piece of not Kleenex, but just a paper towel. There was no cleaning of the brush. It was just white. There was no brush. It was just wiping off a very simple palette knife. There was no thinner needed. It was a knife. Now let's get some of this onto her face, and I think I need some kind of an actual red here, because it would be fun to have that as well for, and this is it. So purple matter. Let's see how much of this we can get out here. Okay. take a little of this. Let's mix it with some of our white, and you can see it's a very different looking red there. And let's get a little bit of that into her skin tone here. I'll even let a little bit of that pass on to some of the purity seals. Are there any other purity seals? Not too many. We'll thin this down. We're going to take a little more weight, and I'm going to use this over here on these wings. And this is the other thing too with the oils. And I've mentioned it before. I used to think that, okay, I'll just use the oils for the big stuff, the quote unquote big stuff, like the cloaks, shields, maybe marble on a base, but all the detailed stuff, I'm going to do that in acrylics. And the more I do the detailed stuff with the oils, the harder it gets for me to do any details with the acrylics. Because the oils are thinner than water. I can take a brush that is no good with acrylics, just a destroyed one hair brush, and be able to do more detailed stuff with the oils than I can with the acrylics. Crazy as that sounds. Now I'm also going to get a little bit of my, it's a little more of a yellowish color in there. Here, let's not quite have so much paint on that. It was a little bit too much. And this is a bit more of the drop the color there, clean off that brush, and then push it around like this. See, we got those just a bunch of big old lines there. This is why, I mean, there's just no layers with the oils. Because that's the other way you end up with just too much oil paint, is because you're painting all of these layers. When layers aren't really what you need, that's not what you're looking for. What else? There's actually, it's interesting, there's just a little bit less of the armor on this one. There's more cloak and other stuff. Now we'll get some of our lighter blue on this side. And it's again a bluish kind of a gray. Let's see what we can do on this, on the grenade here, and then we'll even use a touch of this on this purity seal here. The idea is we let that again have a little while to kind of, I don't want to say dry, but a little time to set. A little time to set. Let's get some of that cadmium yellow deep. It's mixed with some of our, not raw sienna, yellow ochre. This actually can't get too bright here. A lot of this is in shadow. An awful lot of that's in shadow. I think that's as much as I can do. Now, I do believe there is a, yep. So let's do this lighter line over here. I think we're going to not do a symbol in there because with that being in the way, I think we're better off just letting that be a place for the eye to rest. There's plenty of stuff going on there. Plenty of stuff. Nice little line there. I know there's a little bit of a shine, makes it harder to see. And I don't mind if some of my green gets into this because it's sort of shading that line. Because the idea is I do this one here, which kind of by default sort of has some shading on it. And then when it's had a chance to set up, I will go back and add more of the final highlight to it. when we're working on multiples, though, it's so much easier to say, okay, I'm moving on to another thing. It's just so much easier. This is, like I said, it's not necessarily the ideal way to use the oils, but I want to just have this one color test figure here. Now, let's see what we can do here to brighten up our Inquisition symbol. We're going to go back into this with some darker tones as well. And even, look at this, look at the impact that has. Here, let's just get a little bit of that over here now. We'll take some of this paint away. Let's push some of this stuff around. So it's not a line, it's a shape. We're always looking for shapes, not lines. Now I might go in here, I might grab a little bit of my cerulean blue just so that I can... Now we'll save that. I'm going to save that later. I'm going to go for a couple of darks here. So we got our brown matter here. And this is already, my goodness, that's already starting to, I don't want to say kind of coagulate, but that's thickening up nicely. Let's chuck in a couple of darker lines here. We might even thin that down more, not quite in that sort of panel line wash glaze sort of thing, but definitely thinner. This might be more of a glaze over here. Whatever these little rocks are, just darken those down. Going to find some darker tones here. We need to get definitely some darks over here too, because you must have dark to show light. That's certainly in the Book of Wapple. That's already there. It's been there for quite a while. Just going to get some of this in between the fingers. Maybe even a little bit of darker lines in some of these. We will go back in. We'll have to highlight some things. We're going to have to... It's not just a one straight path. Sometimes it takes some twists and turns along the way. And I think as we, let's get that little bit of a horizon line that's right here that we did on our other one. As always, broken up, not just a solid line. That was the thing I used to always do. And see here, I'm trying to actually give it that circular look by kind of curving it up around whatever that is on the power pack. Establish some more darks over here. Maybe even on our green. We'll just do a quick little blend. Right, so we've got that darker there. We'll just pull some of that down. Again, part of that big advantage of what the oils can do for us. I'm going to have to get a little bit of my, I think some cerulean blue or ultramarine, but some kind of a brighter blue that I can use for some of the diode things here. Also, just thinking about a couple of That's the indigo. If you're wondering what that is. Once again, sorry. Again, the voice is just gonna. I don't know what's going on. It's just being a pain. Catch a couple of more darks over here. Maybe even make that a little bit darker, and now we'll just see. We'll blend that away. Look at this. Look at how we've blended that. Straighten up that line kind of by default. Yes, you can do some nice sharp things with the oils. Okay, so what we're going to do is just maybe give this a few minutes to set. Now we're going to start bringing out some more detail, probably some more lights in her hair, see what we can do with the face. It's just going to be some additional refinement from here on in, and kind of each area, maybe even bring in some more. I think that'll be our first task here, maybe, is to bring in some more bright, intense stuff going on with our object source lighting. So that'll be our next priority. So I did add a tiny touch to these to the palette here, more so for the things like this here on the back. Now, to me, cobalt blue would be a sensational color for this, but we'll mess with that later. For right now, I just want to see here. We'll take some of our ultramarine. We're just going to get some of the little bit of our titanium white in there, and we'll just do that right there. Cerulean blue is kind of, that's what I was more hoping to use, but you know, is what that is. I am gonna just take some of this now. It's almost a little bit of a purple here. Remember, we do like our purples and our golds, don't we? And I'm just gonna get a little bit of this here. See, a little bit of reflected light. I know we were talking about object source lighting and all that, but we strike where the iron is hot sometimes. And I really want to get some of this bluish color here on the bolter. Why? Because that's also going to enhance the flame. Whereas just a neutral gray, yes, it is a juxtaposition to that obviously much warmer sort of firelight, but there's just a little something about having the bluish tone there, and it even has, again, a little bit of a purple tone to it as well. Yeah, let's have a little bit of this on this grenade too, and a little bit of it here on the interior surface of that bolter. Okay, now we haven't really done much at all with our object source lighting pretty much since we started this. Remember, with just the nature of this paint, we wanted to give it some time. I think we've given it well over an hour since we've actually touched it at all. And now I'm curious. We shall see what happens. We are taking some of our cadmium here. Also going to little bit of our titanium white get into that. If it gets too pinkish looking, that's where some of our yellow, that's our cadmium yellow. But again, it's not an actual cadmium. Otherwise, I wouldn't be piling up the paint quite so much on my finger as I just did there. Now, you could just wear a glove. If you see me wearing a glove, I do have some gloves now. I was able to get some of those. I really need them for the 3D printing. That's why I actually got them. So we get some lights over here. As much as it dries the camera nuts, if you see me painting oils and wearing a glove, that's where I'm maybe using an awful lot of cadmiums, genuine cadmium stuff. And no, I'm not gonna, I'll use them sometimes. I have plenty of the faux cadmium stuff. So I'm not just going to not use that. I'm not just going to chuck it in the garbage or something like that. I will use it. I don't want you to feel like you must go out and spend a whole bunch of additional funds on, say, something like those cadmiums. I am going to have to thin this down. There's no way around it here. Just to get it to stick, and this is the liquid variety of the thinning process here. It must happen even more. Now, that's why I've got to add some more of the cadmium yellow, some of the white, because otherwise, not going to stick. And you see, now it does, because we added that level of thinness to it, but it can only be so much. And then after a while, we will have to move the other direction. It will actually have to go thicker as opposed to thinner. Also, I'm going to try and get a couple of lights onto our Rosarius here. I'm pretty sure they still call it a Rosarius. Let's see what I can do on the knuckles of her glove that are right here that I think are going to catch some of that light. Perhaps just a bit more on this surface. Can you see that? Yeah. Okay, I think that's about as much as we want to get on the Rosarius there. And then, for sure, we must get a couple of horizontal areas of light here on this piece of armor. Now, it's tough because actually the flaming skull is kind of in the way just a bit. And even though this is not going to have object source lighting on it, I'm going to use some of this brighter orange just up here. Let's let that have a little bit of impact. Like I said, we're going to be going back and forth in some areas, some more than others. I'm going to really try and get a even much lighter version of our glowing color here. Now, I'll say another thing too, a little piece of advice. If you do have pets, especially pets that shed a whole bunch, and you're working with your oils, you may want to have something that separates this from the critters, because if they're shedding, you will not believe how that fur or lint or whatever, it can find its way to your miniatures. I mean, I've had it happen with water pores, so nothing to do with oils. So I've had many things be affected by that sort of stuff. So it's another thing I would like you to be aware of. It's not like you have to lock it away somewhere, but just somewhere out of circulation where maybe those stray pet hairs are not going to land on your oils and dry in there, or your resin water for that matter, because believe me, it can happen. I don't know how many times something like that happened, and I didn't really do much in the way of, this was minimal resin pores. I think you would prefer to not have part of Fluffy's hair immortalized in your project. Now maybe you do, maybe you do. Now this is where we're gonna We've added a bunch of lighter things. Now we're going to go the opposite way. This is mostly the brown matter here. And the idea is just to, yeah, you kind of had lots of light and no dark whatsoever for something that's supposed to be really a pretty sharp demarcation line. Now, speaking of sharp demarcation, I don't think I want that to be that sharp. Didn't really intend for it to be. So what I will do is take this and we shall smooth out parts of that, not the whole thing. Just went after that a little bit. Same over here. See, it's kind of a scumbling action. The more I leave that just dry in place or set in place, the better. Now we're grabbing a little bit of that cadmium red medium. That's going to get mixed with our orange here. And remember, we never actually finished this part with our acrylic paint. We will finish that now with our acrylics. Let some red work its way into here. Essentially, the farther away it's going to be from your light source, the more red it would be. Again, letting some of that red work its way in here. It has to be really thin, though. These are some very gentle brush strokes. I mean, really gentle here. So even here, there was a little bit of some kind of lint or hair that attached itself. It can happen. Again, over here, a little bit of our red. Now, if it just doesn't want to cooperate too much, because we're working with all this thin stuff, what we can do is just sort of plop down a bunch of this here. We'll grab some kind of a brush here that should be nice and soft. And we just gently move these together. Sometimes brushing it on is just too harsh of a process. You just kind of plop it on there and then you push it around like we've done here. Sometimes a better plan than trying to always brush it on. Now, some of this also, it needs a bit of darker orange red back here. As much as we like our object source lighting, it can't just overpower everything here. We need to, ooh, what? We actually need to get a touch of it right there. And you can see it's more of a reddish glow in there. It is not, we're not hitting it with full on with a whole bunch of yellowish orange fluorescent paint. Nope, just minimal amount there. We're gonna work some red into the armor here where it's kind of getting into our bit of a shadow area. And on the other side here, we've got to start to think about, I mean, it has to be gold after all. We've got nothing here except our original little pre-shading color there, so we'll change that. Of course, it's kind of reflecting the object source light that's on the cloak itself, and the cloak is now reflecting that back onto the armor, which is pretty funny. Again, this is a much thicker paint here because we've got lots of layers of thin paint. Don't be afraid to go a little bit thicker. It is okay. I'm just going to also hit some of these areas out here. Again, it's about refinement, right? We got the fleur-de-lis out here that we'll hit with some of these lighter tones. We're going to work some lighter colors here into the armor. It's so much easier here. I mean, it just kind of blends itself. So much less work involved. But it's about patience, timing, the willingness to, and it'll be even more important when we get into the entire unit. That idea of just kind of giving it some time, waiting for just the right moment. This is going to be some basically that lemon yellow type. There's a little bit of the orange that worked its way in there. Now I will thin this down and I'll see if this sticks. That's good. If not, I may have to go in the opposite direction. But the thinner paint seems to be sticking right there, which is good. Question is, and I need to right in here get that a little brighter, but you can see how it's really thin. That's where we just have to stop with this brush. We stop with this brush. We find something else that is going to be a softer, potentially blending brush here. Let's see what this does. Sure enough, we rely on this to spread that paint around, and look at how now we've got our nice little blend there. If we had tried to force that, wasn't going to work. We will do the same here on the armor there and the part of the robe / clothes there. Once again, I think I'm going to see what happens now. This is almost, I don't want to say straight up white here, but it's also much thicker. We also need some reflected light down here. That's going to be in the form of some of our green. I mean, yeah, we've got our object source lighting reflection, but now we need some standard reflected light, essentially from the base there. Here, let's put a little bit of a greenish tone in these stones or whatever those are supposed to be. Make it perhaps align with our base a little bit more. We will find ourselves some lights over here. I think that's going to be thinned down too. Let's get ourselves some more lights up here. Let's see how light we're going to make this green. And this is more for the cloak right here. Might be, that's about as light as we're going to want that green to be, I think. And I'll place these here, and then probably in the next segment at a certain point, I will go in there and smooth those out just like we've done on a lot of parts of the armor. Again, see the cloak now starts to have a little bit more form, a little more shape. Trying to build on all of these shapes as evenly as possible. Now we can get some of our green reflected light here. Some of it there. It's the cloak, it's the base, it's all of those things that are essentially being reflected back. I'm going to try and get some cadmium yellow, mixing it with the white so we create that lemon white, or lemon yellow. Or it could be lemon white. I mean, it has an awful lot of white in it. Could be lemon white. Now, this is tough because there is some stuff in the way. That bolter really is causing... It's hard to get at these plates right here. But we're getting some stuff in there. Again, another advantage of the oils. Sort of does make it easier to... And I know I've used that phrase blind blending a few times. We haven't really darkened this down. There's some of that Payne's gray. I knew something was... I was forgetting something over here, and that was this. Darken that up just a touch, and now I'm going to see if I can't clean that up a bit. I think one of the last things we'll do is stuff like the little bit of freehand that's over there. Where's my indigo? Indigo. Slightest hint of that green, maybe. And we are going to create some... Oh yeah, and purity seals too, I think. We'll hit those guys. It's pretty darn simple. It's mostly just that series of lines like you do. I'm gonna see if I can... You know what? I'm gonna throw just more of the... Some more orange over here. It's looking a little bit flat. I've never liked these things here because it always is... It's covering like two halves of whatever. It just is kind of more of a pain than anything else. I see that has remained on the sisters. Even now that they're brand new in plastic, some things still remain the same. We'll get some of that reflected dark here. That's, again, our kind of a brown matter mixed with some of the indigo. I'll get some of this darkener here, and then the next step, we'll lighten that up too. Like I said, we're just going to start continuing with more and more detail on things. The usual way. Try and do obviously our freehand there, just that little bit of kind of a typeface thing that we did on that other figure that I showed you. Okay, so we're good to go now. what we'll do is try working on the face, the hair, and doing some of that freehand stuff there for sure. There might be some other stuff that happens, but that is definitely what we're targeting. Is the face, the freehand, as much as I can reach the face, and as much of that as you can actually see, because that could be challenging. And as always, ideally, we're not necessarily having to go in this early with a lot of the detail stuff. Maybe we've worked on 8 or 9 or 10 other figures, and then we swing back around to be painting stuff like the faces and some of these highlight things on the armor. Okay. And that just about, yep, that'll do it for this segment right here. Next up is the face, the hair, freehand things, and we'll do that next. So I hope you don't mind. I've changed my lighting just a little bit here because I have to I have to get in some tight quarters here, and I can't see anything on the face with the other, well, with the lack of lights. I know for you this looks unbelievably bright. For me, even this is still somewhat on the dark side here. Now the idea is to put some eyes on here first if we can. This is one of those one hair Winsor Newton brushes. And no, this hasn't been allowed to dry or anything like that. This is every bit as wet. So let's see, we got ourselves a nice little eye right there. Let's see if we can do the same on the other side. That'll be perhaps more of a challenge just because, well, right-handed and just where the hair is falling here. Looks like maybe we were able to get that going. Give her a little bit of an upper lip there. So essentially what I'm just doing is taking some of my kind of an off-white here, and just letting that mix with all the skin tone that we put there previously. At least that's the goal. I'm gonna give her a lower lip here. Hopefully just a bit of a light on that chin. And I think there's a little bit of her forehead that shows here underneath the hair. It's just a tiny bit. And again, I realize that this light's kind of on the bright side here. But as you can see, there's kind of some depth to this. So we've got that pretty well. Now let's see. We're going to grab our indigo here. Why? Because not only is it a really nice, rich, deep color, but it's also that thinner color. It's like the very dark version of Terra Rosa. And let's see if we can't give her some eyes now. So there's a little bit of an eyebrow, eyelid. And she's just kind of looking almost towards you a little bit. One more. There. I think we've got that now. So let's maybe give her some hair highlights too. And then we're gonna, let's do a little bit of some scroll work here. Taking that same kind of indigo mixed with the brown. And let's see, it's not just a straight line. You can see there's some variations in that line. I don't want it to look like Morse code. I try and also give it some ups and down too, so kind of upper and lowercase letters perhaps. It has to be just that right balance of enough liquid to make it flow, but not so much that it's just going to run all over the place. We certainly don't want that. And let's say if you're not comfortable doing this all wet into wet, you let it dry. If you're working on a whole army anyways, there's a pretty good chance that your oils will be, especially if you are getting them in the right proportions, that it might already be dry anyways, which is just fine. That'll be just fine because it'll maybe be a little bit easier for you to do your freehand stuff. If you feel more comfortable that way, you don't have to do stuff that you are not comfortable doing. I don't want people feeling like you must do it all wet into wet. You have to. And there is nothing that you have to do. I just suggest that if you want to maximize your oils and maximize the benefit to you, just maybe give some of these things some thought. That's all it is. All right, some lighter stuff going on in the hair. So I'm going to see what happens with some Terra Rosa. We'll mix that with a little bit of our yellow ochre here, because I'd like something that has a little orange to it, but not the fluorescent orange. We don't want it to rival that, and I think we've got that going pretty good. I can only do a couple of those brush strokes. I have to go back and get some fresh stuff here. I can do a couple. Gotta go back and get some fresh stuff. And it looks light because we have some fairly decent amount of darks established there. I'll probably go one more. Yeah, I might even let a little bit of my cadmium yellow work its way into this. That's the cadmium yellow light. I think some of these hairs that kind of sweep across the forehead, those will be important. Thinning this down. Now the next layer on top of this, however, if I want to go lighter on this and do some kind of additional highlight to that, I'll probably have to actually leave it much thicker. Or, once again, I just let it dry and then it doesn't matter. I go as thin as I want afterwards. It's entirely based on your needs. It's your figure, your army, your whatever. So you do what you got to do. And I will go lighter on that. I'm gonna use, let's see what happens with this here. If this is thick enough to stay there. Sure enough it is. Yep. Just if that would have been too thin, you wouldn't see anything left behind. So I always say there's no percentage or whatever. There's no formula. The figure will immediately let you know. You won't have to wait. Figure's going to let you know straight away. It's like, nope, not thin enough, or whoa, too thick, or whatever. Now, of course, this whole notion of keeping track of that, it'll become more second nature to you as you continue on your journey with the oils. At first, it'll be a challenge to just kind of, okay, what did I first do here? Was it thinner? Was it thicker? What was it? It will be more of a challenge. I'm also going to get a little bit of some orange out here. Going to get some orange, well, again, not the fluorescent type of orange, but this is just her hair color reflected here. It's supposed to be gold. It should reflect some of this. And by reflected, that's kind of, again, it is a relative term. It's not reflected as in like reflecting that super bright object source lighting. Now here we got a little bit wider area to work with. Maybe we can do something besides just our little faux words here. So we got some of those there. Now let's do got a little bit of red here. We'll make one of our little boxes here. So some of that sort of calligraphy thing going on. Now we'll take, and this is going to have to be thicker because that was pretty darn thin. And we'll just put, first I'll do a little border around this. Now you've seen me do this with the acrylic before. And the crazy thing is, it's actually easier to do that with the oils. Wet into wet, no less. Because again, remember, this brush, as far as acrylics go, is completely useless to me. I can't do anything. I can't get any paint on the figure whatsoever. Yet here, we've been able to do all of this nifty stuff here. Now, once again, I do apologize for needing this brighter light on. It's just a little bit of a hair there I need to get rid of. Bit lighter now. Some of these crazy, those have always driven me nuts. These little dots right here, because they get wiped out when you're trying to file the mold lines. Sometimes the more things change, the more they stay the same. How much more of this brighter stuff are we going to throw in here? Don't know, but I need a touch more light on that purity seal there. I can see I want potentially another little area of light right here, but not a whole line. Let's just see, it's a couple little dots right there. That's all it is. On these, on our shoes down, I want to make sure we've got this. Yeah. Okay, let's also, that's some of our white, basically kind of a lemon yellowy type color. We're going to try and get some of our brightest areas there on the skull. And now let me see what I can do here on the armor. Just need to clean that up a touch as well. Okay. Gonna throw a little bit of a dot highlight right there. It's almost more of an ambient light highlight, actually. I also want get some of our cadmium going here. Again, that is our faux cadmium. That is not your real deal. So we broke that up and put a couple of dots there. All right, so I think what we can do is kill this light here and make things a little bit easier for you. Yeah, easier for you. Again, for me, it's kind of in the pitch black now. I've got my yellow here again. I'm going to try and develop a few things here on the back of the legs. Maybe just a little bit of a lighter tone here on that. And now, let's see, where is my... Oh, what the heck. I'll just going to do this. We're going to take our fluorescent here. Let's just do some... couple of these guys back here. Why not use that fluorescent? And, here we go. Looking for that, which I also will have to get some of that in here. Just a suggestion. So I think we've got that now taken care of. I see just some areas of reflected light. You can see it's got kind of a greenish here. That's our yellow ochre that's mixed in with, that's some of the initial green that we had. Okay, can you see this? I think so. There. Lighten it up a little more even. Now remember, if you see a couple of these hairs going kind of wonky, well, it is a mostly destroyed brush. That is it's something that I expect. I know it has to kind of maybe look weird for you guys. It's like, why is all these hairs just kind of pointing all these different directions on that brush? Yeah, because it's mostly dead, except for just a couple of hairs. Getting a couple of extra light things over here. I don't want that to just be an outline. So we're trying to do something here besides an outline. Now we need a line along the top edge of this. Like so. And then what's going to happen back here? We're going to start with a darker font, just like we did. All right, get me some of this is some of the umber over here. We have to thin this down quite a bit. Once again, who knows, maybe even as we're doing this, I might be painting this over dry oils. It could be dry by the time I get to this because we're doing so many more figures. We're not just doing one like this. So things could end up being dry anyways. Okay. And there's a nice little bit of an E there. Trying to give it that kind of old English style typeface. Now this brush may be a little too thin for this. I may have to shift towards one of the other brushes, but I'll just go with this for right now. And the nice thing is, let's say I don't like this at all. I can, and like that T is not in the right space. That is not proper kerning. So we just wipe it away. It's gone. And I'm thinking I'm going to use a different brush here too. I think you can see that. Gonna get rid of some of the extra paint. We need ourselves another E over here. Yeah, I think this brush is a little bit better for what it is that I'm trying to do. Let's get our M in here. So like I said, when we're doing this on the whole rest of the unit, this may end up being just painted over stuff that's already dry. Let's get ourselves an A here. And who doesn't love a good exterminatus? Maybe just get that E extended a bit further. Okay, that takes care of that. So this is your color test figure right here. We don't want to go too much more into this because it is an army painting thing. It's not about just painting one figure. We want to be able to replicate this several times, and we have Seraphim to do. We have some of the Repentia to do. It's not just this. We're not going to be doing just this over and over again. There's some other things too, or other types of figures from the army, because it is, after all, it's supposed to be about the whole army, not just part of not just one figure. Going to get myself a couple of darks there, and we are good to go. So I do want to say thanks again to everybody, because being able to experiment like this with the oils, with the fluorescents, all of this different type of stuff, it only happens with your support, and it is definitely always appreciated. So then the next one, it's going to get really interesting now, because that is where we jump into our full-fledged painting the rest of the unit. So I'll catch you on that one, guys. That's going to be episode 3, series 19. See you then.